So, hi everyone, thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartree here today with another episode of Presenting Champions. Today, joined by a very special guest. Really excited for this one. We've been trying to make this happen for a little while. Finally got there. Today's guest, Liam Wilson, known as English Wilf on King of the Street, undefeated on King of the Streets, No Rules, Underground Fight Club, as well as holding one of their records for one of the top three fastest knockouts on King of the Streets as well. Undefeated there. In addition to that, he's also European bare knuckle boxing champion. He's competed in Lethway, K1, MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, quite a mix of everything. So also made history with his wife competing on the same show together as well. So we've got a lot to talk about today, including the future, where there's talks of fights with BKFC. I don't know how much we can say about that. Ex-military background. We've got a lot to talk about. But before we get into all of that, that's enough for me talking about you in third person, mate. Thank you for coming on once again. It's
no problem, man. Thank you for having me. No problem.
It's going to be awesome. And like I was saying, obviously a little while in the setup, but we got there. That's what counts. Hopefully, I've done that introduction justice as well. So going back to the beginning, not so much the very beginning when you were born, but your early life, because you actually were in the army. You're actually an ex-military individual. So I think that's an interesting place to start. A lot of people will want to know about that. So we're going back to when you're 16, I believe. Joined the army. Let's start there, please.
Yeah, so I joined straight from school. I never knew what I wanted to do, with my life after school. I didn't want to stay on or nothing like that. So I ended up joining the army, and I ended up in the Horse Guards, like Queen's Guard. I was in there for 5 years, and then when I come out, I was lost a little bit almost, because when you're in the army, you have your own set of rules. It's like a completely different life. You don't you don't pay for medical, you don't pay for anything like that. It's all included as a package. So I was on good money and all shit like that. And when I come out, I was a bit lost. I missed that camaraderie and that sort of family oriented thing. So I was just floating in between jobs and never really knew what I was going to do, and started getting into a bit too much trouble. I was fighting all the time and stuff like that. So I knew I had to move away from home. So I ended up getting a job as a guide, as a holiday rep. So I did a summer season in Gran Canaria, then I did a winter season in the French Alps, and then I went back to Gran Canaria, and then I ended up staying out there. And then after that, I ended up in Sweden, and that's where the fighting begun. I'd never even stepped into a gym before I come to Sweden. It was I was 27 years old at the time, so I started in a club and I was doing Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu twice a day. I was addicted to it. And I did that solid for 1.5 years, and it just got me really far, really fast, because of how interested I was in the fighting side of it. I wanted to compete as quickly as possible. And that's what happened. I just threw myself in the deep end, and it all went on from there, really. That's where I met my wife in the first gym that I was in Sweden. She'd already was an established fighter. She'd competed in K1 and stuff like that for maybe 5 or 6 years before. So she used to fuck me up all the time in sparring. She's seen me from the start when I couldn't kick or couldn't punch properly or nothing. So it's interesting it's nice that she's been there from the start. She's seen it all from the beginning, and now we're here. It's fucking crazy, man.
Absolutely, it is amazing how far you've come, and obviously the bright future that is still to come. but we'll get to all that in a minute. So basically, just refocusing on one aspect of the past before we carry on moving forward. Obviously, you had no fighting experience at all before the age of 27, except for a little bit on the street, obviously.
Yeah. No
Until you
martial
got that.
arts at all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
That
so
is,
nothing at all. That was the first time I'd stepped into a gym, and I think when I stepped into that gym, I must have weighed like 92 kilograms or something like that. I'd never been competing at all, and I started competing in jiu-jitsu maybe after like 2 months of training it, and then I went on to Muay Thai, MMA, and then I was just hooked on the whole competing side of it. But as soon as I took the gloves off and I competed in the bare knuckles boxing side of it, my first ever bare knuckle match was against Rocky Morgan, which was an experience to say the least, because he was like so experienced. He's an amazing fighter. He's a friend of mine as well now. So it's more of an honor now for me to say that I fought him, because I never really knew about like how good he was at the time. But now I realise now we're both in the same sort of bare knuckle world. I know how much of an honour it was for me to fight him. So yeah, so once I took the gloves off, that was it. Then I will never put gloves back on again, because bare knuckle is just my thing. Like,
yeah, you definitely found your sort of niche, your place in the world with that, which we will come to in a moment. Before we do, I just want to focus on that time when you were quite new to competing, because it's quite a cool story in a sense. It wasn't an easy beginning for you by any means necessarily. You know, there was a bit of a bumpy road there, and I know there were all these different styles. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that the first one was K1, the first fight, and then you transitioned into a few other things, and obviously the bare knuckle boxing. But there were obviously wins, but there were losses here as well, and I'm not sure of the exact timeline, so you can walk us through that. But basically, this is just to focus on. Um, this obviously led you to King of the Streets, but I'm also interested in how you bounced back from um, a few tough losses there. Let's put it that way, and
yeah, for
became the
sure.
great champion that you are today. You know, simple as that, really.
Yeah, so because I did like start late and I hadn't had that experience, like 95% of the people that I fight on paper are more experienced than I am. They've been fighting since they were like 10 years old or something. So I learned the hard way, I was like, I took the losses. I got some wins along the way in MMA and Muay Thai. I never got beaten in Muay Thai, but it was all amateur. And then I had my first professional fight, which was full contact in the gloves are off, against an unbeaten fighter. He'd never been out of the first round. He'd knocked everyone out in the first round, and that was my first ever full contact fight, and that was against Billy McNally. And we went the full 5 rounds. It was a loss, but I gained a lot from that fight. So, and then when I went on to the bare knuckle side of it, I lost against Rocky. It was a tough knockout. It was not only tough for me, but like my family and stuff was there, so it's not obviously never nice for them to see that. And I always had everybody in my ear, this is stupid and stuff like that. Of course, they're worried about you. So I lost that fight. I lost a left weight fight against another very good fighter from Canada, who's Dave Leduc's sparring partner. So I was coming off like three big losses, and that's what brought me to King of the Streets, because I lost something inside me a little bit. I was taking too long to like get into the fight, because I've always done that, slow starting with gloves on, which you can do, but in bare knuckle you can't do that. It's like you can get like a lot seriously more injured. So after that, I seen in King of the Streets on Instagram, and I was like, I need to give this a go for myself to see if I still have that thing inside me, which I like used to have before I started fighting. So I messaged the guy, set something up. I didn't tell anybody about it. My wife was pregnant at the time, so just me and her went down just on our own, and I went down there. I won that fight, and then I got on really well. I earned a lot of respect off the lads who run King of the Streets and who were in High Crew. because I just turned up with my pregnant girlfriend, and everybody who was there was coming from like football hooligan firms or coming with like a lot of support or whatever. So I got on really well with the lads there, and then they took me into Hype Crew, and now I represent Hype Crew when I fight for King of the Streets. And I was like, when I first come to Sweden, Ascari is like one of the biggest fight brands and sponsors like in Sweden. And I was buying their stuff before I was ever imagining getting sponsored by them, and everything come with King of the Streets. So when I got taken into Hype Crew, I got sponsored by Ascari, and I was representing Hype Crew with King of the Streets. And then as soon as I had that first fight on the King of the Streets, I just knew like this is my thing to do. I fucking loved it. Everything that I'd done in the past definitely brought me to that moment. You know, I took like pieces from MMA, the left way, the bare knuckle side of it, the jiu-jitsu, and I think that's important to go as far as I've gone in King of the Streets, to know it all, because you can be the best boxer in the world, but it's only going to get you so far, because you're going to meet someone eventually who can like take you down and have some sort of ground game, and that you really do need it all. I think that's important to, if you want to go far in King of the Streets.
Absolutely. Something that really fascinates me, to be honest with you, I know you've talked about this a little bit in different interviews, is this was going to be, your first fight with King of the Streets was going to be your sort of make or break, as I understand it. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, you did win, but I've seen interviews where you were saying if you didn't win, you would have sort of packed it in and called it a day. Obviously, you did win in a very decisive fashion as well. I definitely think the left way and the headbutts and everything was an important factor in that. But just walk us through your mindset actually going into the fight, like to test yourself and how you were feeling and everything, basically.
I just thought like the age was in the back of my mind, you know, like at that point I was like 30, I think. So then like the age was kicking in the back of my mind. Is it stupid to start this stuff at this age? Because that's what you hear off of the people, you know, and like so the age was in the back of my mind, and then because I'd had taken a bad knockout, and then I got like, I know a cuts are superficial, but to other people they look really nasty. So to my family and stuff like that, it was it didn't look good, you know, and they were really worried. And to have that in your ear all the time is like, more than anything, that's the hardest thing to like push through as a fighter, when people are like whispering in your ear saying like, making you doubt yourself a little bit, that maybe it's stupid. And that's not in a bad sense that they're doing that. They're doing that because they love me, but still it was like the hardest thing for me to push through, and that's what I needed to get from. I needed to know whether I was being stupid or like I did still have something there. So going into King of the Streets, that's why I didn't tell anybody about it. I was just doing it for myself, and it helped a lot that I had the support of Matilda. You know, she come down with me, and I think that's a major thing as well. Like if anybody ever says to me, "Oh, I want to do King of the Streets," but my girlfriend doesn't really like want me to do it, I always say like, I wouldn't do it, because it's really important to have that support. You know, if like to go down there without it, it's not nice, you know, and not nice to put your family through either. So that was a major thing for me to have when I went in there, and I got everything out of King of the Streets that I could ever want and ever expect. So yeah, it's just it's my home now, and I love that. Like I see my style of fighting as made for King of the Streets. So yeah, I love it. And now, yeah, it's where I am now. You know, before when I first started fighting, my goal was just to fight on an event where I had a walkout song. And I mean, now what I've done is just absolutely crazy. Even now, what we're doing, our next step would be KFC, is just like so ridiculous that I would never even imagine to this day, like I'd ever be where I am, you know. And it's King of the Streets opened so many doors for me, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing, and we'll get to that in a moment with BKFC and what you're doing in the future. Don't get me wrong, we'll definitely take a dive into that very shortly. Before we do, talking about King of the Streets a little bit more, because it fascinates people. People don't see into that world too much and everything. Obviously, after that first win, you said that before, obviously, your family and some of your people were not very happy with things. obviously, to give the context, you came back to England for some of those fights, and they were all there, I believe, for some
Yeah.
of them. So, what was the reaction after you won with King of the Streets that first time? Was it sort of something you really broadcast from the rooftops, or were you still quite low key about it even after you won?
No, I didn't, not from the rooftops. It was more like I needed that for myself, you know. I mean, everybody was happy for me for winning and stuff like that. And I don't think they ever thought that I was going to go, like, take it any further than what I have done. But to me, I just knew straight away after that fight, the whole event, like the whole atmosphere, the whole, like, I've never been to anything like that in my life. Like I've been to a lot of events and a lot of fights and stuff like that, but the respect people have, like there's rival hooligan firms, there's people who have beef fights and stuff like that there, and there is no booing, there's no like trouble there at all. Like the fighters get so much respect from everybody in there for just stepping into the cage. It's like it's something that you can never ever like put in. My words will never justify the experience that King of the Streets is. It's like it's super super fucking special. So it's not even about. I hear a lot of people ask me like, how much do you get paid for King of the Streets? And it's like for me, it's not about the money. Like I get good money now because I've earned it. Only the winner gets paid, but I started on fuck all, and like I I would fight there for free. It's not nothing to do with the money because what you get out of that is like something that you can never like explain properly or justify it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And another thing, obviously, you've got some great wins in there, obviously being undefeated, but it's not just being undefeated. I mean, it's a decisive way in which you won. Obviously, you've got the Jonah knockout, which was
Yeah,
one of the top three fastest. You've got, obviously, the one with the head kick, which I think that's been all over the world, hasn't it?
yeah.
Matilda, I think I'm saying his name right, but that was a big win. Which one is your favorite, basically, out of the King of the Streets fights you've had so far? It's a big question,
uh, Actually, the one before my last fight, before the head kick, was my favorite fight because I just got to show all of my skills in it. Like I did stand up, I did the kicks, head kicks, low kicks, and then I'd taken them down and I ground and pounded it with like punches and headbutts. And like for me, that was my favorite because I got to showcase everything that I can do, and not just let people think that I'm just a stand up fighter or I'm just like, I don't know ground game. And that's what a lot of people think about me sometimes. They think I only have stand up, but that was a good fight for me because I enjoyed the aspect of like showing what I could do all round. But like the toughest opponent that I've had was the last one. I mean, it didn't look like that because of how it ended and the way the fight went. But that guy was fucking very experienced and a very, very tough guy. He comes from a strong wrestling background, which I'm not a wrestler. I come from jiu-jitsu, but wrestling's in a league of its own. So to win that fight was like I gained the most out of it, really, like legitimized my place where I was. He was a professional fighter. I wasn't a professional fighter at that point. I've only come from amateur fights. So I hear a lot of people say, I read some comments every now and then about saying like, oh, these people fought like real fighters. It's like we do, I fucking fight professional fighters, and I've seen people turn up on King of the Streets with over 100 fights professional, and they come to King of the Streets and they get the floor wiped with them. It's not the fucking same. So as much as I might go to the MMA and they might kill me there. If they come to the King of the Streets, it's the other way around. It's completely different. So yeah, I like the one before was my favorite, but the last one was like that was my biggest test, I think, of opponent wise.
Yeah, it's interesting to get your thoughts on it because all of the fights have been pretty amazing, to be honest. But obviously, it's good to get your thoughts on it. And with that in mind, with your thoughts on it, I'm curious to get into your mindset as well because obviously, again, I've seen a few things where you've spoken about this, and it's fascinating the way you sort of flip a switch. And you've talked about this with some of the stare downs and some of the way you sort of intimidate the people. And I just find it fascinating because you put yourself in this situation that's as tough as it gets, and you've obviously flourished in under those
Yeah.
circumstances. So how do you mentally sort of prepare, get into the zone for a King of the Streets fight, and what's going through your head in that
I
situation?
don't know, like after that first fight, I was like, I know the feeling was completely different. Like on the stare down and stuff like that, of course, I'm trying to act like this is like, you want to try and act that it's not bothering you. But like I did have to try and stop my leg from shaking and shit like that. And I remember that like it was yesterday. And I hated that feeling, that I had to force that down. So after that fight, and when I knew that this was my thing, and then I got accepted into Hype Crew, it just felt like home to me. And like I just created this like completely different person, because I seen on that event and events afterwards how damaging cuts can be on the other side of like not winning. Um, so I never wanted to be in that position. So I knew I had to be. I'm such a polite person, like to speak to normally, but I cannot be like that to go in there because it's so dangerous. So I created this person that like I would like think that I would kill someone in there when I'm fighting, and you need to think like that because that person wants to do the same to you on the other end. So then after that, I could just, because I felt so home there, I just managed to create this thing that like I can be super respectful before the fight, but as soon as the stare down starts, then I'll show them like the person that I'm gonna be when I'm fighting them, which is like the killer that you want to be in there. So I just I can manage to switch it on and off. I would never want to walk around like that person outside of the ring. So it's good to be able to have the to be able to like switch it on and off like I do. I don't know how I managed to do it, but I just knew I needed to create that person to fight on cots, because otherwise it's a dangerous martial arts to do. So I just created this person that would would be that type of person in the ring. So I don't know, man. I don't know how I do it, but I just needed to do it to survive in there. So it's worked well for me, and I can, yeah, I'll just keep doing the way the way I'm doing.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's definitely working for you. I just find it fascinating because to be in King of the Streets, you must have to get into that killer mentality and
Yeah.
just going beyond a lot of fights. And you obviously do that, so it's interesting. The last thing about this before we move in a little bit more into the future and a few other things,
Hmm.
people want to know about the concrete floor. I mean, I've done a few interviews with King of the Streets fighters, and this always comes up
Yeah.
as a subject. How does it change the game plan, obviously, compared to like a mat or a cage floor or whatever else it is, from your point of view? Do you find it alters either your game plan or your opponent's in any way?
Not for me personally, because that's all I've ever known. So like for me, my speciality isn't like um I don't come from a specific like a special background. I've like done it all. I'm not like don't come from wrestling or don't come from just jiu-jitsu. I just come from a mix of it all, and then that I created something in COTS. That's when I got created. So for me, my game plan doesn't change because the way I fight was created in COTS. But I do understand, like, if you come in and as a wrestler and you think it's just easy just to, like, come in and just do your normally wrestling stuff. Like, we've had Olympian wrestlers come in, and you just can't fight the way and wrestle the way you want to, because the concrete floor is an issue. Like, if you miss a takedown, you get punished big time. So it does knock you back a lot. Like, that opponent that I fought last, his speciality was wrestling, a lot better wrestling than I could ever be. But for some reason, he didn't try and take me down, because it does like make you standoffish on doing that, because it's a concrete floor, and if you fuck up there, you make that one mistake, then you're gonna get punished big time. So it does. It affects everybody, and it's the same. It's the same as like people can have 100 fights in K1 or Muay Thai, and then they come to this COTS and they think maybe for a second that that will overlap into COTS. You can just be that same fighter, and you can't. whether you like to admit it or not, the concrete floor, it does affect how you fight. So not for me especially. Maybe that's why it doesn't bother me as much because, as I say, I wasn't come from years of background in martial arts. Like, I only started like properly after cut. So for me, that's all I've known. But for other people, I can always understand that it does affect the game plan a lot. Like,
Yeah. Very much. I mean, it's its own world in that way, its own style, and,
yeah,
and yeah, I've seen how different people transition or don't, as the case may be, and you've obviously seen that more again. So it's great to get a little bit of an insight into there. Obviously, with bare knuckle boxing as well, you decided to go back into that, and you've now won 2 European titles. So, starting at the beginning with that, obviously after cuts or during this process, you went back into bare knuckle, and you chose that as your next venture. Can you walk us through like your memories from the fights, how it feels to be European champion? I don't have a really narrow question about this because I sort of see it as a phase of your journey, and there's more to come. But it would be great to give those fights a mention as well, because especially how again your mindset towards this, if you went back
yeah,
into the sport that had been not gone so well earlier on with
yeah,
the
yeah.
Rocky fight and changed the game a bit, dominated it big time. So let's talk about that side of things a little bit as well, please.
Yeah, so after like the Rocky fight, I was like, I said I'd never do, but I was never a boxer, you know. I didn't have the movement for it, and I after that fight, I said I'd never do boxing again, you know. But as I was training for cops and like other fights and stuff like that, I just developed like my skills as you do when you train. So I just felt more comfortable at that point. An opportunity came up to fight, and at that point, I just thought, actually, I think I could do that now because I felt comfortable with my hands and the boxing side of it, and just the bare knuckle in general. You know, since I was training for cuts, I don't never put any gloves on, even to train. I train without gloves 100% of the time. So at that point, when the opportunity came up, I would just felt like in myself that I was a lot more prepared to be able to hold my own in a bare knuckle boxing match because I just knew the difference between like being a boxer and being a bare knuckle boxer at that point, and that's what led me to it. So yeah, when I did the bare knuckle side for my first belt, I went up like 2 weight classes for the opportunity to get the title. So that guy was I'd watched his videos before, and like he just totally surprised me when I actually fought him because the videos I watched before, he never used his reach and stuff like that, and that's what I trained for. And when I fought him, he was just a completely different fighter, and I know that from experience that when you fight someone on a similar level or even better, it brings out the best in each other. So we just like had a really good boxing match and bare knuckle boxing match. He was like, I struggled at the start because I struggled with his distance and stuff like that. So I had to adapt, and it took me around to do that. But then in the end, it worked, and I always like to fight like that. Never like have a set way of like one plan just to fight because if something doesn't go your way, I need to be able to change it, and that's what I have to do. And I just have to be careful. You can't just change them things in bare knuckle. Like I heard people in the crowd like, you need to cut the distance, and I was like, it was pissing me off a little bit because I knew what I had to do, but you know, obviously that guy was a tough guy as well, so I can't just jump into like cutting distance unless I do it properly. So I had to take my time a little bit and work my way in, and yeah, then in the end it got stopped through a cup, but it was it was a good fight, and that meant a lot for me. That belt, I was super happy with that. Like,
Yeah, it's an amazing achievement, and it's an amazing achievement anyway. But the reason I highlight that is just I've just got so much respect for it in the sense of how you went from the Rocky loss, and I've seen interviews you've done where you said obviously at that time you hadn't really practiced boxing as much, and this that and the other, and you went from turning from that into turning it into a massive strength, and obviously winning the European titles, and obviously the mental side of with that loss, with your family seeing it, and the sort of embarrassment, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way or
No,
anything,
no,
but I
exactly.
just
You know
mean
what you mean? Yeah,
if the people were there, and then from flipping that on its head to being like the two-time European champion, it's absolutely amazing, and that's not even a question. That's just me saying, and it's also, it might sound strange to you, but it's inspiring for other fighters as well who've had these tough losses or had these bad experiences, that you can, it's not over, you can flip it on its
yeah,
head. So,
yeah, for sure.
just something to highlight. So moving into your future plans, I mean, first of all, your future plans with King of the Streets, because as I understand it, you're basically going to carry on competing there alongside bare knuckle boxing and everything else you're doing. Am I right in
Yeah.
saying that?
Yeah, so yeah, I want to carry on. I mean, I've wanted to get on to King of the Street the past few events, but unfortunately now, because I think because of that last fight and the way it ended, most of the people that are who are willing to fight me aren't willing to fight me straight away. They want like 2 fights on King of the Streets before they fight me, which I understand in a sense, but also in a sense they try and say that the more I'm more experienced, so they need more experience. But I'm on paper they're more experienced than me always. So, but I just need to wait a bit patiently. There is somebody that I do want to fight on King of the Streets. They're going to be fighting on one of the shows coming up. That'll be a second fight. So if he wins that, then hopefully I can have it with that guy.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we're all looking forward to seeing you back there. I mean, it's going to be amazing to see you back in with them. Obviously, there is some exciting news as well with BKFC and a bit of the future plans as well. Because I know we've spent a bit of time looking back, but your journey is basically on the up and up and everything. So we'll talk about this, and then I've got a few things about your training and a few sort of broader questions about that. But talking about the future first, yeah, I mean, what's happening with BKFC? I mean, I think that's something that's going to be on everyone's mind at the moment. So let's start there.
Yeah, so yeah, we now signed for BKFC UK. So the massive news: me and my wife Matilda will both fight now on the 26th of November. The posters haven't been released yet, so we can't talk about the opponent. But this will be like my biggest fight or that I've ever had. It's an ex-UFC guy, so um, I've trained with him before. He's helped me train for my one of my title fights in bare knuckle boxing. He is a friend of mine, and we did know each other. Um, so yeah, it's going to be a biggest challenge. It's going to be an honor to fight him. It's going to be a good fight. So I'm excited for that. And Matilda has finally got a fight confirmed as well for the BKFC. So we're going to be back together fighting on the same show, making history again. So it's super exciting. So this one we have in Newcastle, and then the next one that we're hoping for in April is Liverpool, and that's just going to be a dream to me. So I can be in front of my home crowd, you know. So I mean, I could easily, happily retire with a smile after doing that in Liverpool. So I just looking forward to doing Newcastle and then getting to Liverpool and doing that one. It's
Yeah,
going to be big.
amazing. That is amazing, and also the fact that you guys and Matilda as well, you're doing it together and things like that. I think that's something that's really cool about your journey, and obviously, I mean, her fight, she's an amazing fighter as well, and that's almost a whole different story we could go off in with
Yeah,
the history that she's made, and everything like that. But yeah, got a lot of respect for both of you, which is something that I'd like to get into a little bit as well, is about the training aspect. So obviously, you guys train together, and I'd like to get into that a little bit. Not obviously anything to do with people's personal lives or whatever, but the way in which you support each other and things like that. It's fairly unique. I mean, there are some. I have come across some couples in like MMA and certain things where they do compete, but it's usually for different promotions and things. So how does that work? Do you obviously sort of share tips and techniques that you've picked up from different fights and sort of synergize
yeah, pretty
together?
much like because we have trained with each other for the whole time. Like when I started training for Lethway and the bare knuckle boxing, she also took she's also took her gloves off to train, so she's been training bare knuckle at the same time as I have, you know, just because I was training for Cox, I was training for Lethway, I was training for Cox again. So it hasn't been something where, like, when she wanted to do a bare knuckle side of it, it hasn't been something where she was like, oh, I need to like start learning how to do bare knuckle boxing, because she'd just been doing it the whole time that I had. So it was a pretty like good transition over, and I knew, because I hold the pads for her without any gloves on as well, that she was made for bare knuckle as well. It's just something that suits her so much better, you know. So the training side of it is like it's been fun, and it's been an easy transition to go. It just feels right, you know. We haven't like it hasn't been anything that we've had to push and to try and go in that direction. Like the process that we've been going on in the journey, it's just took us to this place. It's just something that we feel that we're meant to be at. So it's been good, you know. It's not easy juggling a life and having a kid and training together and living together and stuff like that. It is hard, but it's so worth it, you know. And it's amazing to do it together as well. So
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's just so cool, you know, the way you support each other, the way you're on the same shows and everything like that, man. And talking about that as well, being on the same shows together, how does that dynamic come together? Because you see a lot of things in the fight game, even when I go to shows where somebody's fighting and you know their mother or father or brother or sister or whatever is even in the audience. Never mind if you've got like brothers or something fighting on the same show, the nerves and like some of what they go through must be
yeah,
shocking. So especially when it's mates of mine and I see them fight and their partners are there, they're usually in bits like that, you know. So how do you balance like basically not worrying about the other person, if you get where I'm coming from with this?
yeah. I think I can stay super calm because, you know, Cox is like, to me, is like the most intimidating scenario you can be in as a fighter. So um, like to go to these shows now, of course, I'm nervous, more nervous like when Matilda's fighting than I am, but I like to stay calm. I don't like to waste any energy about like to being over nervous and overthinking. You know, I save it all for the fighting. So I think that just comes off a little bit onto Matilda as well. It keeps her calm, and like she knows she has to be that way, otherwise it'll stress me out, or the vice versa. So we just bounce off each other like that for shows, and it's pretty good. Now the show that we were at for BFBA, we were able to like pick and choose where we wanted to be on the card, so it hasn't been a problem. We just coach each other. But BKFC this time we will be having like somebody from the from Hype Crew. He'll be coming to coach us. So this time we'll have a coach with us because I think it's a bit more needed. You know, it's a big step up for us, so we want to do it properly. You know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, like I was saying before, the future is very, very bright for both of you. I mean, there's some big fights on the horizon. Last two things, and then we'll wrap this up. Obviously, um, family wise, you know, with Zion, that is the name I'm saying, right? Yeah, it's a very cool
Yeah,
name, by the way.
yeah. Thank you.
If you know, down the road, like he wanted to fight, or you know, if you have other kids, and obviously with both
Mhm.
parents fighting, they wanted to fight. I know it's a little bit of a sort of abstract one. I don't always ask this. I've asked a few people if their kids watch the parents fight. Obviously, not old enough yet, but that down the road in that sort of scenario, do you think it could be like the whole family training together, like you and Matilda,
Yeah,
kids, and
of
you know?
course, man. Like, if he chooses to do that, like, we will be happy for that. You know, like he's at the gym with us 5, 6 days a week, and he loves it there. But I'll never push him in that direction. I think it's important to know martial arts. Definitely, I will like him to do that, but I won't push him into being a fighter if that's not what he wants to do. But if he does, and we can all be a fighting family together, that would be amazing, man. Of course.
Yeah, it's just very cool because you don't see that a lot. I mean, there's a few people in boxing that where there's families, obviously, from your neck of the woods with the Smith brothers and everything. There, you know, all of them being boxers, and obviously over in the States with Mayweather and his family, most, you know, they're all boxers. But you don't see it a lot, so I can just sort of picture you guys in the future now. They're all sort of training together and things like that. So that's amazing. And obviously, we've talked about the future a little bit. So when I close out with interviews, what I usually do is just ask if you've got anything you'd like to say to your fans, because obviously sports would be nothing without fans at the end of the day. And obviously, your profile with King of the Streets and everything, it's through the roof. I mean, you look at the views that your fights get and things like that. You have a lot of support. So with some of those people watching this, listening to this, and everything, what does their support mean to you, and what would you say to those people?
Yeah, man, the support is everything. You know, it's still very surreal for me when like people message me and say I inspire them and like they love what I'm doing and they look up to me as a fighter and stuff like that. It's still like very surreal. But yeah, I thank them all, man. I appreciate all the messages, all the support, all the followings. You know, so yeah, I really appreciate it all. You know, it really gives you a good boost, like to keep going in the right direction. To know that somebody's like looking up to you in that way. So I really appreciate it, man. It's a big thing to me.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I mean, it's lovely to see the support that you get, and the loyalty to some degree, you know, you seem to have as well. So wonderful. But the last thing for me to do, just to say a big thank you again for your time and for sharing everything you've shared about the past, present, and the future. Obviously, a few fights down the line, I'm happy to do another one of these because I know there'll be more belts and more stories to tell, you know. But for now, it's absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much, mate. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.